Al McFarland. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarland. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Today is Friday, January 9th, and we're streaming live from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Got two things on the agenda today. One is a scheduled version of our regular Friday programming. We call it the Healing Circle. We talk about health and wellness, usually in conjunction with our partners at the African American Child Wellness Institute. And we thank them for their partnership and for facilitating this and other important conversations about our health and well-being. I've got two guests joining me to talk about a particular area of aging in our community, what it means and what challenges and opportunities there are. But I also want to spend part of today's program with my guest, my neighbor and friend, Marquita Stevens, and another colleague, both like all of us concerned about the affairs, the events that took place in Minneapolis on Wednesday, the shooting death of Miss, the name is skipping me now, but the young lady who was killed by ICE in a activity in South Minneapolis. Her name is Nicole Good, and the first name will come to me in a second. I'll say that in a minute. We'll talk about that and other items of public policy, public awareness in our city and in our country. If you want to be involved in the conversation, we want you to be involved, and you can be involved by sending a message or a comment in the comment section on your platform. If you're on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, you can communicate and let us know what's on your mind. We welcome and invite your involvement, your thoughts and your reaction to the things we're talking about. And with that, I want to ask you also, those who are here, share to your networks and to your contacts that this conversation is happening. And it's an important one. The things we're concerned about are things that concern you and health and wellness and well-being. Well, with that, let me bring in Dr. Carrie Sheets. And Dr. Sheets, you've got a colleague. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarland, to the Healing Circle. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let me have you set the stage talking about what you do, your work in dementia, in aging, and in medicine.
So I am a geriatrician at Hennepin Healthcare, which means that my clinical focus is on caring for older adults and really helping sort of the last stages of someone's life be what they're hoping for. We're here today specifically to talk about the HAT study, or the Healthy Aging Through the Senior Years study, which is a study we have looking at brain health among older African Americans living in the Twin Cities. And it's something we're really excited about because we know that dementia is common, and we really need better data to help our patients prevent dementia.
And you've got a colleague with you today. Why don't you introduce your colleague?
I do. I have Dr. Ann Murray here with me. Dr. Murray is the director of the Berman Center at Hennepin Healthcare and also a geriatrician.
Well, thank you both for being here. So what's the top line message? What should African Americans, Black people in Minnesota, and people in general be thinking, studying, reflecting on as we age and as the prospect of dementia becomes more and more present?
Carrie, do you want to start out?
Sure, I can start. Yeah, so there is a lot that everyone can do to help prevent dementia. We think that cardiovascular disease, so disease in the blood vessels, is an important contribution to dementia in older African American or older Black adults. And so anything that you can do to reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease, so staying active, eating healthy, treating high blood pressure, treating diabetes, all of those things help the body stay healthy, but also really help the brain stay healthy. And Ann, I'll turn it over to you. I'm sure that you have additional suggestions.
Yeah, thanks, Carrie. And by the way, Al, thank you and Lisa for inviting us to talk about our HAT study today. It's a real privilege, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes. One easy way to think about brain health is that anything that is good for your heart is good for your brain. And even more things are good for your brain, because we all have the same circulation system going to our brain and our heart. And things that affect blood flow in the brain are very similar to those that affect blood flow in the heart. So small blood vessel disease is something that's becoming known as more important in affecting brain health and risk of dementia. And things that affect or increase small blood vessel disease are diabetes and high blood pressure. Those are the two things that we know for sure can be targeted and can decrease your risk of small blood vessel damage or strokes in the brain. As Carrie mentioned, physical exercise. So really getting out and getting your heart rate up for at least 20 minutes every day, and also adding resistance exercises. So lifting weights really has probably the strongest effect of anything we can do by ourselves, other than controlling our blood pressure and diabetes, in reducing our risk of dementia. And that's been shown over and over again. And more recently, there have been several major publications citing the need of exercise. There's just there's a good brain health series this week in the New York Times where they've commented about the benefits of exercise. Healthy diet is also critical, and something like the MIND or the Mediterranean diet, both of which emphasize healthy whole grains and vegetables and fruits, high fiber, low amounts of red meat, in contrast to the recent guidelines released by our dear Secretary of Health. Low amounts of red meat, that means beef, pork, and lamb, because they're high in saturated fats, which are bad for the heart and bad for blood vessels. So focusing on beans, nuts, and fish as your primary source, and dairy as your primary sources of protein, is a good way to try to start making changes.
Beans and fish.
Beans, fish, nuts, whole grains. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, talk about the scope of the HAT study. Tell us again what that means, and what's the source? What's what motivated the study?
So it's the HATS, or Healthy Aging Through the Senior Years study. We do have hats with the HATS logo if anyone enrolls that we can give out. The idea behind the study is that dementia is up to twice as common in Black older adults compared to many other older adults in the United States. And we have really not enough data on the risk factors and what we can do to lower the risk of dementia. And so we're enrolling anyone 55 or older who identifies as Black or African American. You can have normal, your brain can have no concerns about your memory. You can have concerns about your memory. The only kind of exclusion there is if your memory is have such memory impairment that you can't do the cognitive tests, then we'd ask you not to enroll. But we're enrolling anyone 55 or older, and it's an observational study, which means that there's no interventions, no medications. We'll get detailed information about your memory and thinking and kind of the areas of strength and weakness, and then ask about things like heart disease, hypertension, diabetes, all of these risk factors. And then we're following participants over time to try to get a sense of which of these risk factors are most important. So really, where can we be focusing our energy in clinical settings to help our patients reduce their risk of dementia?
And so what do you think will be the impact of the study? This is a 5-year study. It's a long-term study, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is, and we hope that we can continue it longer than that if we can get NIH funding. Mm-hmm. So this is an observational study. This is not a clinical trial. The difference being we are not giving medications. We are collecting data. We're not modifying risk factors or adding medications. And the goal is to determine.
And you're not withholding any treatment from any people that are in the study or in the.
Absolutely.
No, we're not intervening at all.
Okay.
Other than to ask you to come in and visit with us for these clinical visits and get a blood draw if you consent to that, and then a brain MRI. Mm-hmm. So what I was going to say is that one other thing that we need to be mindful of is that social determinants of health neighborhood, income, education, quality, education source, food insecurity, all of those things. If there are negative social determinants of health, we recently found, there's been a recent publication showing that those actually increase the risk of cardiovascular disease. So high blood pressure, diabetes, and high lipids, and obesity, all of which increase the risk of dementia. It's interesting that we have multiple community sessions for our participants during the year. And at the last one of them reminded us that we should be stressing the importance of being overweight, of obesity, and the extent that it increases the risk of dementia. That they felt that that's not called out enough. And it does being obese approximately doubles your risk of dementia.
So when I saw the note and the invitation for you all to come on this show, thought about my personal story. I come from a family that has a history of obesity, number one, and dementia. My mom, my aunts on both sides of the family, and people that I knew about that were like distant aunts were experiencing dementia in their later lives. And not just the men, but not the women, but some of the men in the family as well. So it makes me now at about almost 80, think about what I can and should be doing. And I'm thinking that I should sign up for this study, number one, because it'll keep me focused on paying attention.
Fantastic.
That's the first step. But beyond that, how does a person like Alan McFarland, who is aware and is seen in his personal life as a caregiver and as a son or uncle or nephew, whatever, how do we sort of approach our responsibility for our own health and for community health around this topic of dementia and the things that go into it? You mentioned diabetes, you mentioned hypertension, I'll check that one off. You mentioned heart disease, I'll check that one off. And so a lot of things keep this top of mind for me. How do people like me figure out ways to be present and to be proactive in addressing the potential for dementia?
Carrie, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. It's a great question. And I'm sorry to hear about the history of dementia in your family. And unfortunately, it's such a common illness that we hear that from, I would say most, if not all of our participants, that they have someone in their family that has dementia. Prevention is where we'd like to focus our efforts, although also early identification and treatment, if there are changes. So things like seeing your primary care doctor regularly to manage the hypertension, manage the diabetes. We know that duration of sort of control of blood pressure is really important. So every month that you can have your blood pressure controlled is good for your brain and good for your heart. And sort of every month that you can control your blood sugar is good for your brain and good for your heart. I also like to stress that health.
I just want to say that Carrie especially knows what she's talking about because she has done research on exactly that, on to what extent blood pressure variability increases the risk of cognitive decline and dementia. She's really an expert in this field.
Oh, I think that's overly kind, but thank you, Anne. But it is, I really kind of managing these conditions that we maybe can't feel, but we know are important. The other thing I'd like to bring up is that I think you kind of alluded to this, Al, but there's a lot of, health is really a community and sort of a family-based thing in many senses. So staying active and finding ways to be active with friends and family is really important. If you're someone that goes to the gym, great, keep it up. If that's not, for a lot of people, that's not what they're interested in. Even walking a little bit more, a couple extra blocks every day can really help with health. And then social engagement. We know that staying socially engaged, seeing friends and family is really important for brain health. And that's something that kind of families can do together, friend groups, communities, neighborhoods. And I'll send it to you. It was such a great question. I'm sure that you have more, Anne.
I think you gave great examples. I think stepping back and going through the checklist that we more or less just listed, making sure that you have your blood pressure, your blood sugar, your lipids, your cholesterol under control, your weight at a normal body weight, and exercising. Those are the things that you can do by yourself to monitor those risk factors. The other thing is, as Carrie mentioned, is staying very socially active, very socially engaged. Many may have heard the recent reports stating that loneliness increases the risk of dementia. And that's because your brain isn't being stimulated enough. So staying socially active and finding new activities, learning new activities, or volunteering can all help build more brain, what we call networks, to decrease the risk of dementia.
How does stress come into play? Is stress a positive or a negative? I mean, stress is brain work, it's body work. How does that impact?
Definitely negative. And it's believed that one of the mechanisms of how high levels of adverse social determinants of health increase the risk of cardiovascular disease is via stress, due to stress.
And so I raised the question because we're going to talk about one of the stressors in community right now, and that is all the incessant news cycles about what has happened in South Minneapolis and the death of Miss Good, who was killed at the hands of ICE officers last week. But then we're also watching the news cycles about what's happening in Venezuela and our leader threatening to take Greenland and Colombia and Mexico and everybody else that doesn't see the world the way he sees the world. So I'm figuring that all this, at least for me as a journalist and newspaper man, creates elevated stress. And I'm trained in this area to look at and hear this information. What must it be doing to everybody else? And people are worried about their children. For example, the public schools are closed today because of officials wanting to make sure that children are not exposed to the potential of an ICE encounter, as happened yesterday at Roosevelt. So I don't want to go deep in the woods on that, except for to say, how do we navigate the current cultural environment, social environment, in ways that allow us to both be present but also maintain health, with the objective of lowering, potential negative impact of that stress on our bodies and how that would lead to dementia. That's a long way around, but that's a general thought. React as you would.
Yeah.
It's a great question. I wish I had sort of a single answer to it. I think I have a couple sort of ideas and suggestions, but it's a real challenge. And I'll say in my clinical practice, it's something I hear from patients, how all of the uncertainty and chaos and sort of these, what seems like regular events are impacting them in their health and their mental health. So I think one important piece is seeking access and treatment early for any mental health challenges. Anxiety and depression are really common, and it's important to get treatment. We know that there are connections between mental health and sort of cognitive health. I think the other piece is remembering that treating hypertension, treating diabetes, staying active, all of these things will still help your brain and your brain stay healthy even in the event of stress. And some things like social engagement, like spending time with friends and family and being physically active, can even help lower stress physiologically. They can lower levels. We think that cortisol, which is one of the stress hormones, probably plays a role in some of these bad effects of stress on the body. And things like physical activity and staying socially engaged can lower cortisol levels.
Let me pivot a little bit.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead.
I was going to say the importance of embracing community. It can't be overstressed. And I think that's something that Carrie and I have learned, the strength of the Black community in our interactions with the participants and with in our different meetings, is how much they depend on each other for social connection, for social support, and how wonderful that is. But not being so frightened that you don't reach out. It's really important to reach out and talk to your friends and get the support and keep your family close.
So it brings to my mind another question that I've talked about often, and that's about research and data, and sometimes the ambivalence in the Black community about science, university, government research, and that ambivalence is reflective of lived experiences or stories in the culture, where information that should be personal and private and based on an objective of improving our health found us being subjects of research, but not beneficiaries and not partners in the research process. So how are you discovering hopefully a positive shift in the attitude in the Black community about research? Because I think, well, that's my question. What do you think, Doc?
I would say that hopefully, to start out with, Carrie and I try to keep ourselves well informed of the horrific previous research occurrences over the past up to 100 years in underserved communities and unprotected communities. So we try to keep that in the back of our minds at all times, to try to reassure our participants that they are our partners, and we can't do this work without them, and we truly appreciate the time and their trust in us. Trust is a very delicate and difficult thing to build up from scratch, but I have to say our community engagement partners have been just critical partners in letting us help build that trust. So we have 3 different community partners. We have Clarence Jones with his Human group, who has run many beneficial public health projects in the Twin Cities for the Black community, especially Black men. And Monisha Washington, who runs the LINK program. Together, they have been the backbone of our recruiting, of spreading the word, of really getting engaged with the community. They go out to multiple events and table events and get people signed up. We also have participated in some of those events. We also go to some of the other regular clinics and excuse me.
Bless you. Gesundheit.
Thank you. To be, in touch with the community and understand what's already going on in terms of public health measures.
Carrie, Dr. Carrie, any thoughts on that? I mean, so the question for me is, I sense in my own understanding and appreciation a willingness to do and engage and to seek to support the creation of knowledge and to the expansion of science, but that willingness in our community is tied to our demand and expectation that we are at the center of our healing, and not simply items to be observed by somebody else for their intellectual curiosity, or maybe for the benefit of them, but not for us, since we end up anyway. So I'm thinking that more and more people like Al McFarland are saying, you know what, data-driven decision-making is a good thing. And how do we get our hands on the levers of creating these processes for study, for examination, for creating new knowledge? How do we participate as equity partners in that process? And I think the more we have that discussion in our community, the more people like me are going to say, you know what, I got a role here. I got a place here. This is valuable to me, and I need to do it and tell my cousin, my uncle, my auntie, and all of them. We should do this for our mutual benefit and for science itself. They're one and the same. Carrie, what do you think?
Oh, okay, so you can be our poster child now.
Well, I'm willing. I'm willing. I think it's important.
Beautifully said.
Is it okay? I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
I think it's really, really, really important that we elevate the voice and the sense of equity and ownership of our health in our people.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate this conversation, and some of the other things we did, because we do, this isn't, we're collecting this data to try to help our patients and the people living in Minneapolis improve their health, but ultimately you're right. We want to kind of it's not our data, it's the people's data who are coming and volunteering. And so things that we've done before the study started, the community engagement partners led multiple focus groups to make sure that we were asking questions that were of interest to the community and sort of getting data that the community felt would help them and help their own health. The other thing we're trying to do is make sure we give results back to participants in a timely manner. So if we notice that there's memory changes on the cognitive testing, we'll let participants know. On the brain MRI, if we see anything unexpected, we'll let participants know. And then we have kind of lists of resources. If someone doesn't have a primary care doctor or sort of doesn't know where to go, we try to help with that process to help them get connected so that they can follow up on anything that, they volunteered their time and let us sort of give them these cognitive tests and get a brain MRI. And so that if we find something that's directly relevant to their health, so they can take that, and follow up on it as they'd like. I think the other thing we do are we have participant appreciation events where we bring in speakers to talk about dementia and some of the current science on dementia. And I think we're looking to expand those kind of beyond participants to also just provide information about dementia because it's common and it affects so many people.
And we also return blood test results, routine blood tests that you might not have had in the past year or two that could be helpful to you and your primary care provider, such as blood glucose, measurement of kidney disease, and hemoglobin, and cholesterol.
Awesome.
All that you can
people connect with you for more information and to be a participant. How do they get connected to the HATS program and to you?
So we have both a phone number and an email address. So the phone number is 612-283-6746. That's 612-283-6746. Or you can email us at HATS, it's HATS, study at Berman Center, BERMAN Center.org.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Sheets, Dr. Mary, thank you both for being here. I appreciate the conversation. This is important information. And if I can help personally in any way, bringing my voice and my platforms to create awareness, I am willing. I think it's so critical.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
I
appreciate getting to join.
Yeah, I apologize. I forgot to mention Robin Fraser, who's another community engagement person that works with the Center for Healthy Aging Innovation at the university. She works with the Altar program in the churches. So she's also been tremendously helpful, and we're very grateful for her partnership.
And so this interview we'll use for a feature story in Insight News in the next couple of weeks. So we want to keep being sort of multi-platform in our orientation here and our capabilities. So thank you both so very, very much. Listen, I'm going to pivot to bring in my other guest, the leaders of the Urban League and Common Cause. But if you are willing and able to stick around, please do, because the conversation is about community, but stay as long as you can. Let me bring in Marquita Stevens and Anastasia Belladonna. Marquita, are you there? Your camera is off. If you're there, why don't we bring you into, there we go. And I'll have you introduce your colleague, Anastasia. Let me introduce you. Marquita Stevens heads the Urban League of the Twin Cities. She's a powerful advocate for the dignity, the civil and civic rights of our community and of all human beings, actually. And she's leading one of the legacy institutions that has traditionally created pathways in employment, pathways in policy development, pathways in health and education, generally advocating for the health and well-being of Black people in America and in Twin Cities, and by extension, all people. So Marquita, as always, thank you for all you do. Welcome to the conversation. And I'm glad that we can talk about some of the things on your plate, that we can connect with Anastasia about your partnership with Common Cause. But I wanted to also focus on the public affairs hotspot right now. And that is the incident in South Minneapolis where a woman was killed by ICE. But let me just say hello, first of all, and what's on your mind today? And you can take it from there.
Thank you, Al. Always good to be with you. And it was a great segment on mental health and dementia, et cetera, that the prior guests presented to the audience. We're going to make sure that we stream this on our platform because our audience needs to be certainly aware of and a participant in all that you described. So thank you very much for bringing that to the forefront and to our attention. It's quite timely as we've got an aging population, me amongst them. So, so as many of you know, the Urban League is a longstanding community partner in the areas of workforce, family stability, housing, and education. And we continue to do those things, descriptions of which can be found on our website and on our social media posts. My presence today is to share the time together with Anastasia, who is a director of Common Cause, a partner with the Urban League in government relations expertise and teaching young people about democracy and how they might participate in it. They're part of that program that we offer, and we just have a long-standing commitment to the issues that confront us all. I asked her to join me in this conversation about recent events with the participation of ICE in the midst of democracy as we move forward with that in this country under this current regime, and what that means to us and what we may need to be on guard for as we prepare to live out the rest of, I guess, this decade, as we, based on what the midterms will show, will determine how we live that out. I'm going to let her introduce her work and priorities, and then we can together talk about recent events.
Thank you, Marquita. Thank you so much. And thank you especially to the members of the public that are joining us in this conversation. I was very, I was very heartened to hear the medical context of what impact a lot of the activities and a lot of the stressors that we're facing in the work that we do today as defenders of democracy. It's something that we are always talking about, is the importance of self-care. It's the importance of seeing our own healthcare as part of resiliency and part of resistance when we're looking at systemic approaches of dismantling our constitutionally protected rights and so many other amazing milestones that we fought so hard and so long. And I'm looking at some of the folks I'm very familiar, Al and Marquita, that have been doing this a lot longer than I have in this space as well. So thank you so much for creating space to have me come in. Common Cause Minnesota is a nonpartisan watchdog grassroots organization. I like to say that we don't really care for who people vote for, really, as long as they are informed and empowered in making sure, right, that as they're casting their ballot, they're doing so in confidence and with facts. We're making sure that people know what their rights are in the democracy space. We're making sure that people know how to hold power accountable. And I'll talk about an example of that as I was preparing for this, I literally got the news about. I'm very excited about it. But Common Cause does our work under 4 core pillars. One of them is voting rights and representation. The other one is civil rights. A third one is corruption, anti-corruption work that we do, and money and politics. We do that by not just education and outreach, organizing and mobilizing, but for those of you that might already know our name, we're also part of the local lawsuit to push back on the Department of Justice and its efforts to obtain sensitive voter information in Minnesota in an effort, we believe, to weaponize that. And we also get involved in lobby work. Our lobby work, however, does not include, it has never in our 55-year existence, it does not endorse a party or a candidate. We find it very hard to hold power accountable if we're also door knocking and phone banking, right, for that. So we do have a C4 arm, but it is only limited to being in these spaces of power, making sure that it is the people of Minnesota that are being centered in the work and in those spaces as decisions are made. Thank you, Marquita.
Sure, certainly. And let me be the first to say and to announce on this show for the first time that the Urban League is considering standing up a democracy center as well. And in that, we will kind of tag team with Common Cause around some of the same objectives, um, putting boots on the ground so that we can inform people about democracy, what they should expect, how they can participate, kind of the broader umbrella of things, nonpartisan, of course, and making people aware of, as they say colloquially, what time it is.
Mhm.
And I think we can use as many avenues as are available to help people understand just that. And whether it's racially divided or not, this regime that's in power now that represents what they represent, which I will call, some kind of fascist order, uh, then we need to be aware of that and how that is going to be played out, what to look for, et cetera, because it is a threat to democracy. And we have to stand guard for that, just as we saw in the murder of, I'm going to call it murder, of Ms. Good just this past week. So it's serious. These are serious times. And we have to understand that this white supremacist ideology that is taking hold is real and it's coming for you. And so it's timely that we're talking about what we're talking about in terms of health. But I would offer that the antidote, at least the initial antidote to the stress that accompanies that, is hope. And so we want to bring in a sense of hope in the midst of that, because if you say that word immediately, you will relax. And so we want to bring in the sense that you're not alone, that we see, and that others see, and that this whole shift in ideology in America is a wake-up call for everyone, and that you're not protected by skin color. You're protected by your ideology. And this is a time for us to determine exactly what we believe and how are we going to live out that belief.
What do you mean, ideology versus color?
The ideology is a white supremacist Aryan framework that is being implemented through Project 2025 that we've been talking about since before Trump was elected, and that's what's at play. Anytime you have and we put this press release out, you have a practice of the shooting into a moving vehicle is a practice that the police abandoned 50 years ago. So you have somebody doing that under the guise of being a federal agent on orders from the federal government, using outdated techniques to patrol and implement the orders that they were given. It raises the question around how they're trained, what their limits are, and how it is that we are to conduct these protests in the midst of people that are operating on a different scheme, which is one of the reasons why I asked Anastasia to join us so that she could provide some input on that base from a legal standpoint as well as a general standpoint. These are the times we must equip ourselves for. As you mentioned earlier, school is closed out of an abundance of caution. That's what we're living in right now. And we've got to take back our country. And so how do we do that?
Anastasia, jump in.
So the one thing that I do want to stress in this context of the conversation as a whole is that we are not powerless.
Correct.
And I really want to sit with that a minute. We are not powerless.
Correct.
We remain the ultimate power in our democracy.
Correct.
And if that was not the legal fact, okay, we would not see a very specific effort to challenge that in every way, shape you can think of, including the illusion that we don't have power. Let me give you an example of what I mean. So, as this tragedy unfolded off of Portland, there's this natural dynamic of shock and awe and just outrage, right? There is this immediacy of what do I do? A sense of helplessness, right? And the only human dynamic to that is this visceral response, right? It could be crying, it could be yelling, it could be, right? And as I'm saying this to you, I want people to remember that this isn't like something that we do that's weird. This is something that's legally protected under the US Constitution. That is the right to protest, to assemble, to freedom of speech, right? What you say should not be subjecting you to any kind of higher scrutiny within reason, right? Because if you're speaking in a threatening way and you're adding conduct to that, right? That's a different level. So I'm not trying to be ignorant with that. I'm just trying to be clear given what we're seeing out there, right? So in that context, there are these debates about why didn't you just obey? How many of us haven't heard that from communities of color? Dude should have just done what he was told to do, right? Or this lady should have just done what she was told to do, right? And that to me is a signal of what Marquita, I think, did an amazing job of really laying out. It's a truth that we first have to acknowledge before we can even have these kinds of conversations and expect it to be meaningful and productive. And that is the framework of white supremacy.
Let me take a minute and sort of go back and review so that if someone is just joining, they know the context for the conversation here. And I'm reading a couple of paragraphs from edited remarks from City Council member Soren Stevenson, new to the school. He's in his first term, starting this is his first official communication to the 8th Ward residents, 8th Ward, that area in South Minneapolis where Renee Nicole Good was shot. And I wanted to say back to my doctors, when I mentioned her name the first time, I could think of Nicole and Good, but couldn't think of Renee. And so I pulled up the note. So that's how important this memory question is to me, because I don't want to not be able to say things because I can't remember. But listen, here's what the rewrite of his statement says. Minneapolis City Council member Soren Stevenson issued his first official communication to 8th Ward residents Wednesday following the fatal shooting of Renee Nicole Good by a federal immigration agent in South Minneapolis, an incident that has intensified public grief and demands for accountability across the city. Good, a mother and longtime neighborhood resident, was shot and killed Tuesday morning at the intersection of Portland Avenue and 34th Street while peacefully and legally observing federal enforcement activity. The shooting occurred just blocks from George Floyd Square, a location that continues to symbolize unresolved trauma from the city's 2020 uprising. He goes on, I'll quote him, saying, "This horrific incident dredges up painful memories of 2020. He said, "We're angry and we're grieving together." Stevenson joined fellow city council members and the Minneapolis mayor, Jacob Fry, in calling for U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement to leave the city immediately. City leaders say ICE agents have been terrorizing neighborhoods for weeks and have no place operating within Minneapolis. So that's the context. And this story is not just a South Side story, not just anymore a Minneapolis story. Since that time, 2 more people have been shot by ICE in Portland, and the entire country, I believe, particularly major cities like Atlanta, New Orleans, New York, Chicago, have seen citizens protest what has happened here in Minneapolis. And so, and like George Floyd, this is likely part of a world conversation about the abuse of power and about the rights of individuals to be free, and whether democracy can survive threats to it by people who have a different agenda that you're referring to, Marquita Stevens. And so that's the context. I'm so glad to see the National Urban League and the Minneapolis Urban League legacy institutions come forward quickly with definitive statements and calls for accountability. Marquita, talk about the highlights in the statement that you and the National Urban League have made regarding this event.
Well, one of the things was pointing out the fact that the training that or the lack of training that is implied by the action of the ICE agent shooting into a moving car. That's gangsterism from a time long past. And so it raises questions around that, and it also signals the fact that they have no limits, and that the community, the onlooker, needs to be aware of that. The national organization shares that sentiment. It also reflects, and we say this privately and publicly, that it is a change in philosophy. You know, you can see that from the appointments that were made by President Trump in the cabinet. You can see that. It is a change in philosophy that is underway. So it's not a function of someone just doing their job. This is inherent in the way it's being carried out, is a change in philosophy, which is going to change the order of things. I would think there's going to be a national, if not international, response to this shift in philosophy that is threatening democracy. And Anastasia's right, in the sense of we can control that, but we can control it for as long as we control the fact that democracy exists in the way it's been defined. And that's just a matter of changing things at the congressional level. So that makes the midterms all the more important. I know we've heard that on various platforms, but it's true. What happens in the midterms is very important, which is why the Urban League is creating and manning up this, or staffing up this democracy center, so that we can have a deliberate strategy to make sure people are aware of the importance of it, because we can sometimes think things, oh, they'll just go along, we don't have any power over it, people are going to do what people do. No, yes, you do, for all the reasons that have been identified already. And the national is quick, I would say, to not only speak to it in the national frame, but to make sure that all 92 affiliates are functioning with the same intensity around this issue, because today it's us, tomorrow it's you. And so there is that alert nationally. And this becomes an example of what happens in Minneapolis. Atlanta is on alert. I mean, folks are on alert around the country as to how and when this anti-democracy philosophy is going to show up in their community.
Is it just anti-democracy, or is it anti-humanity? I'm going to throw something in for all of my guests to react to and respond to, because I fear that what we're witnessing is the dismantling of the movement that we would call progressive. Progressive meaning a movement towards understanding and making the democracy more perfect. It's unrealized dream, but it's a great dream. It's a great idea. And all of us, I think, have said that this is something that's in the making from the beginning and continues to be in the making. We all have a chance to add to it, to move it towards perfection. But what I perceive is intentionality in dismantling the ideas that equality means something, that equity means something, and that diversity has value. And what I see is an intentional effort to elevate hierarchy and the hierarchical structure, patriarchy, serving primarily white men, with everybody else and everything else subservient and pushed to the margin. And so the question becomes two things. One, Anastasia, how do we organize systematically through institutions like the Urban League and other community assets so that we protect, and even despite the nefarious efforts by those that are against our humanity, that we prevail, that we move with confidence, without anxiety, and with a sense of joy, actually, of the work that's in our hands. And then the second part of that, Dr. Mary, Dr. Sheets, how do we in our institutions protect ourselves from wrongheadedness, an anti-science leadership in the Department of Health and in the White House? When these things impact research dollars, medical services, access to health care from ordinary people, insurance costs, what do we do? How do we figure out what alliances and strategic relationships we have to develop to protect and to grow towards the sanity that we seek? That's a big question. Anybody can jump in anywhere you want to, or not, you know.
So I'm going to take care of the policy because I think it's going to be the easier one or the cleaner one, I think, of the two questions to head on so that I could be respectful to my colleagues. I think the key to organizing under this current administration and facing these challenges touches on a couple of things that Marquita said. One of them was it's so important that we are aware of the ramifications of the midterm elections. And the other one was really reinforcing that we still remain the power. But here's the caveat to this dynamic, the nexus to this dynamic, though, to be an effective organizer under this context. Organizing for purposes of changing partisan banners is not what's going to center people in this process. So it's not just awareness under a partisan banner of what the 2026 elections or any other election cycle, regardless of what government level we're looking at. It's teaching individuals how to lean into their political agency and how to hold power accountable, regardless of what banner they're from. Because at the end of the day, they're voted in to be the people's lobby. They're supposed to be lobbying for us, not for their parties, not for their major donors or agendas, but us. So I think that's really key to organizing under these circumstances. And a real example of what it looks like when people take over is what happened just while I was getting ready to jump on this call. I promised to mention it. That's the last statement I'm going to make. As of, if you recall, all we've heard from local enforcement leadership and politicians is we can't because they won't let us do this. We can't because we don't have that. I immediately mobilized our base and said, no, not acceptable. Yes, you can. We realize it'll be harder. We realize you're going to have to do your own footwork. MPD was the first enforcement on site. They were the ones that cleaned out the scene. If you remember looking at the tapes and hearing from other media, right? There are ring cameras. There are grassroots people there. There are constitutional observers there. How can you say you cannot investigate? We just launched it late last night. Did y'all hear that Hennepin County Mary already announced that they're doing an independent parallel investigation? That's people.
Awesome.
That is people power. And that's not people power you wait till 2026 to exercise. That's called holding power accountable. When you have a mayor that stands behind a bunch of politicians instead of a mayor that stands behind, in front, and with the people boots on the ground saying, nope, we're going to get to the bottom of this. Yes, we realize it's going to be hard, but nope, we're going to do this. You see the optics? I know that wasn't his intent. I'm just saying the optics, when people see that, is to say you're putting partisan divides ahead of the tragedy that happened. So I think that's the most effective way to lead, is to really connect with an organization that's not partisan, that's really going to partner with you and teaching you how to hold power accountable no matter who they are, because it's ultimately you who they work for.
That's exactly right. And that's why we're going to stand up the Democracy Center to work collaboratively with the other efforts that are out there and cover the waterfront a lot more.
I just have to comment on Mayor Fry's wonderful contribution to the New York Times, an editorial this morning, talking about his role as mayor of Minneapolis and how he and we are not going to stand for this, and this is wrong, and this is destroying democracy. I thought it was a beautifully written piece, and I was happy that it was getting times in press in the New York Times.
Good
I'm not
comment.
saying
You know,
that's going to solve anything. I'm just saying it's good to see.
well, let me tell you what my hope is and expectation. I still give just so much props to Mayor Fry and former police chief Madaria Arredondo, because within 48 hours, I think maybe 96 hours of the death of George Floyd, Chauvin was fired, relieved of duty, and charges were brought. And I think that they've demonstrated an ability to do that. The county has also done the same thing in the affair of Dante Wright, killed by accident, an officer thinking she had a stun gun, but had her service gun, and killed a guy in a car trying to get away from a parked position. Same thing. I mean, it's kind of like what we saw with Miss Good. So I am expecting that out of Hennepin County, Moriarty, and out of Keith Ellison, and with the support of the mayor, that charges will come. I think they have to be very careful in not prejudicing their strategy, their policies, and their activities and plans until they execute. But I'm hopeful. Question, Ann and Carrie and Marquita and Anastasia, what's the funding link? What risk do organizations have when they take bold positions or just do their work in environments where people question the value of that work, or sometimes are so vested in disinformation that to discredit and to put a tourniquet on your funding pipeline is part of what they're willing to do. Dr. Mary, Dr. Sheets, what do you think? Can your work proceed?
I can reflect on, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm reflecting on our application last year to National Institute of Health for funding for hats, and NIH had their hands tied, but they were trying to advise us on what terminology we could use safely to provide protection against being knocked out of competition before it was even reviewed by DOJ. So, for example, we couldn't include the word Black or disparities, diversity, anything related to our main question. Why do Blacks have twice the risk of dementia? It was outrageous, and but that's the game we had to play, and many others had to play, and many people had their applications removed because of the language. That's just an example, but it's hard to know what NIH is able to do behind the scenes and how long lasting the DOJ effects will be. It's destroyed research in the US. It has set us back probably 20 years by blocking important grants from dementia to cancer to infectious disease. And it's affected many investigators in the Twin Cities, at Hennepin, at the university, and the VA.
Immunization policy.
Yeah, immunization. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Immunization policy, outrageous, coming from a non-scientist who has made a lot of money by with the vaccine industry.
Mm-hmm.
So those are just my concerns. I don't have an answer as to what we can do other than try to unite behind the scenes.
Well, to raise the concern, Dr. Mary, is so important, and I thank you for raising the concern and articulating the interest and sort of the history of what's going on. And Marquita, this reminds me, you and I have had this conversation before. I, served as the board, on the board, and as board chair for a term of the Urban League. And so I was there when the community, and in my view, led by the mayor at that time, sought to cripple legacy institutions like the Urban League, like Phyllis Wheatley, like Sabathani Community Center, like and to supplant them by saying that these legacy institutions weren't providing solutions to problems in the community, because the problems are still there. You know, the poverty is still there, the lack of jobs is still there, the lack of wealth is still there, and our political leaders were blaming us, when actually it should have been us saying to them, you've run this government for 100 years, and this is what we get. And so if anybody needs to be judged, it's you for your failure to live up to the promise and the contract of democracy and of freedom and of opportunity. You have failed. And so how do we mobilize our people to have both courage of voice and of action, so that we protect and grow institutions, and protect and grow knowledge, protect and grow access, so that we can all live better lives? What do you think, Marquita? We'll close with this.
Oh, well, I think you bring up a good point, and it's a springboard for solidarity. I think the question is probably better asked of the funders than the fundees, is what they are afraid of, as opposed to what we are afraid of. We're not afraid to request funding for the things that we stand on. We believe there's merit in them. We believe we're on the right side of things in the positions that we take, in the services that we provide, in who we are. And we've been that for 100 years.
Great answer. I'll call that a mic drop, and thank you all for being here. What a great conversation. Marquita Stevens, President, CEO of the Urban League of Twin Cities, Anastasia Belladonna, who's the State Director of Common Cause Minnesota, Dr. Carrie Sheets and Dr. Ann Mary, both gerontologists, is that the right word? Specialist gerontologist, specialist in dementia, and promoting the HATS program, getting our community to be part of a long-term study looking at dementia in the Black community. Thank you all for being here. I'm Al McFarland. We'll see you next time.